What's going on, everybody? Brett here. We're back in Total War Warhammer 2, doing a quick battle. Today I'm going to be playing as the Dwarves. I'm rallying the High King and his forces to take on the nefarious Druki. And we managed to get this map, which is pretty good for artillery play, which is nice because we have 3 artillery pieces and good high ground. So let me go ahead and put it in slow-mo, because I want to address kind of my build before we get started. This was for fun, guys. This is not a competitive build at all. I was sitting there and I was thinking, you know what? I was feeling a bit bored, and I was like, what would I like to see if I were going to watch, a Total War Warhammer 2 video at this point? Having played for like thousands of hours, having watched probably thousands of hours worth of content on it, and made some of that myself. What would I want to see? And my favorite race in the game, hands down, always has been, are the Dawi. Right? I love playing as Throgrim. I think he was the first hero, first lord that I ever chose to take into the campaign, and he was the first. I think he was the first campaign I ever beat, either him or Archeon. But anyway, gotta love playing as the High King, and he's pretty great. And a lot of times, if I was trying to be more competitive, I would go with a standard Dwarf Lord, really strip a lot of things down, go super wide, probably have a full 20 stack against really any opponent, I think is pretty optimal. But having taken all these artillery pieces, all of these fun units, I thought I should do a little corner camping, go back to the Dwarven roots, and have some fun in this game. So you'll notice first off, the organ gun. Amazing armor piercing, pretty good range. Range of 300 is not the best on an artillery piece, but it should be able to do some devastating work against our opponents. Our opponent, the Dark Elf player, did have 2 Vanguard deployed Dark Riders with shields, so I'm going to turn my Bugman's Rangers and my Ulthar's Raiders, who do have that debuff that they can apply, marked by Ulthar. Reduces armor and missile resistance and missile parry with shield, so very good against the shielded Dark Riders. And I'm going to take my Runesmith and use a Rune of Wrath and Ruin to try and slow them down, so that my Bugsman Rangers here, one of the coolest looking Dwarven units, I love their color schemes, so they could shoot them in the back. Good thing about Ulthar's Raiders and Bugman's Rangers is that they're great in melee combat if they need to be. The Bugman's Rangers do, of course, have regeneration. And the Runesmith, we're just trying to get as much damage as we can. The angle wasn't great, and they're really taking advantage of that speed to go up and around my forces. And I'm going to pull some of my other units off the front line to try and engage them. My Runesmith is pretty well stripped down. I do have 3 of his runes. Oath and Steel for armor, Rune of Wrath and Ruin for damage and minus speed, and Rune of Negation for 22% damage resistance. And yeah, you'll see here, our artillery is already firing. The Goblobber here is the Regiment of Renown for the Grudge Thrower, and it actually shoots little goblins tied to stones. And it's currently hitting the Bleak Swords, but very soon I'm going to switch it over to the Hargoneth Executioners, which are certainly the most valuable targets for that fire. The Organ Gun has been tearing into the Doomfire Warlocks, and I love watching this thing fire. I could watch it all day. And then you'll also see here we have a Flame Cannon, which has a measly 230 range, but when it hits, boy does it hit, and it does a ton of damage. An engineer, a master engineer here, standing in and amongst all of these artillery pieces, 3 of them, and he's got 2 buffs I like to take on him. Everything else I think is pretty optional. Ballistics Calibration, which is in an AoE around him, so he's giving that to all of his artillery and ranged units around him. Whenever he pops this, it's 90-second cooldown. It goes on for 32 seconds. Reload, skill, and accuracy are good buffs. And then also Entrenchment, which I don't ever use on an artillery piece. You use it on a frontline unit that's taking a ton of damage, and you give them that physical resistance, that huge physical resistance, especially when you know that they're not going to move anyway, because they're in the front line, they're tied down. So you give them that buff, that defensive buff, and it allows them to hold for a long time. So check out this kind of cool series of fire going off. Oh my god. So he got really close with the Doomfire Warlocks. I don't know if this is going to be able to hit or not, but it felt pretty good to shoot this thing, because it's very rare that you get a chance to use it. So we tie down these guys with our Miners with Blasting Charges, our Dwarf Warriors, and we're just trying to shoot them. I used one of Throgrim's main abilities. It's pretty new in terms of Total War Warhammer 2. Did we just shoot our own guys in the back or something? No, we did not. That's what it looks like, though. Or maybe they shot a fireball at us. Is that what happened? No, absolutely not. I think he just kind of hit a lip. That's very weird. Must have shot something directly in front of himself. Anyway, one of Throgrim's new abilities is the Oath of Vengeance. And it's a minus 27 melee defense. So once they engaged in melee, I popped that on them. And that allowed us to do, allowed our pretty weak, honestly, in the melee attack department, Dwarf Warriors, to try and get through the pretty weak stats of the Dark Riders with shields. I wanted these guys off the field as well as these Doomfire Warlocks. They're some of the more mobile threats that my opponent has, as well as these Harpies here. And if they're gone, then my opponent has to kind of take my fight on this hill and continue to advance under all this fire. And what else do we have here that's worth noticing? The Ekron Miners. These guys cost 600 gold. That's pretty expensive for a miner unit. But they do have extra ammunition when it comes to their blasting charges, and just generally great combat stats. 91 leadership, they're near unbreakable. For a low tier unit, they're pretty dang cost effective, and they have a decent range, 55 as well. So a lot of times you can just throw for days. In my campaign matches, I usually end up getting hundreds of kills on these guys, and they're one of the few Dwarven units, infantry-wise, that can stand and just do that. Just Dwarf Warriors all in the front to soak up damage, and the Skolder Guard here. Gotta love these guys. Super heavily armored, 125 armor, regiment-renowned version of the Iron Drakes. They're good against infantry. Honestly, you can kind of use them to shoot at large targets as well if you need to. Their missile damage is pretty direct and pretty heavily armor piercing as well. So we're going to see if we can't try and get some value out of this very expensive unit. That honestly, my opponent's army would be really good if we could get some kind of line of sight and shoot at something like the Hargan Executioners. That's basically what you want to be shooting at exactly. So here I think we finally switched on to the Harganeth Executioners with our Goblobber. Our opponent's army is a pretty great dwarf killing army. A mix of bleak swords to take some of that initial engagement, to take some of that ranged fire. They do have silver shields, so they're very good at that. They also brought a nice mix with the Sisters of Slaughter, who are deceptively strong against armor. They have poison attacks, really high melee defense, so they, even though they're unarmored, they have physical resistance and great melee defense, which allows them to kind of stand in the fight. Plus, they're reducing your stats. So, you know, add all that together and they're a lot tankier than they look. Harganeth Executioners are never a bad choice against the dwarves. These guys are absolute can opener units with their giant, great swords. And with their armor piercing and anti-infantry bonuses, they're great versus really any dwarven unit on the field. Sorceress of the Lore of Beasts is going to be summoning, I think Manticores is what she summons. Yes, Manticores. And she'll be using that to try and shut down our artillery. And let's see if she's able to do that to great effect this game. Look at the tremendous damage. The Goblobber is one of the most accurate pieces of artillery in the game, and you give it ballistics calibration and it just goes nuts. Usually does not miss. And then before we get, the lines clash, 2 units of Black Ark Corsairs with hand bows, and these guys have low range, but they can fire in 360, I believe. They fire while moving also, and they're pretty decent in melee as well. So anywhere you want to engage these guys, they feel comfortable. And then Lokir Felheart, the DLC Lord of the Dark Elves. He has his regeneration. He has his, I think it's called Merciless Slaver, yes, so -4 leadership and an AoE around himself, as well as Dreaded Duelist, which gives him plus 26 melee attack and melee defense. Makes him really tough for any Lord in the game to take on. Throgrim is a very tanky Lord, and in a pinch he can do a lot of damage. However, he's not the best at dishing out the damage, so he doesn't have a lot of offensive focused skills. You really just want to try and win through attrition with him, and we may end up trying to use him just to tie down Lokir Felheart. You'll see all the blasting charges going off into the Bleak Swords. That's really what they're there for, in all honesty. Popping our runes here on our Runesmith to try and give our miners a chance. Our opponent going up and around with these Black Ark Corsairs with hand bows. Going to be trying to get a nice angle of fire. He's using these Dark Riders with shields in a concerted attack along with the Feral Manticore to try and shut down our artillery, and he's doing a decent job of it. We weren't able to completely rout off these Doomfire Warlocks as well. So we're going to turn our ranged units, our Bugsman's Rangers, our Ulthar's Raiders, and we're going to mark this Pharaoh Manticore and shoot it. We managed to rampage it, so then we're going to switch our targets here over to this cavalry to try and break them. Ekron Miners throwing lots of charges, and they're going to rout them. That feels pretty good. But the Sorcerers getting up and around, the hand bows moving into position. So we're suffering from the classic case of dwarves being spread too thin, and these Doomfire Warlocks just will not run away. 14 models left. They're trying to get through the heavy armor of the Skulder Guard. The Skulder Guard is just standing and fighting with them. Our flank here is going to crumble. The Dwarf Warriors are excellent against Bleak Swords, but the Hargonnet Executioners, despite taking a pounding on their entrance into this battle, are going to be able to get in without much more trouble. We've managed to keep some of our artillery online, but other pieces have been routed. Our organ gun is offline. Our flame cannon is barely online. It's lost one unit model, but our Goblobber is still firing away. We just don't have very many good targets. We're trying to get rid of these Black Art Corsairs, but they're going to be able to stick and move, and that's a very good micro from our opponent there. Ulthar's Raiders have rallied. I'm trying to use my Master Engineer to take pot shots. He doesn't really get a lot of kills. He's not so much like the Witch Hunter, who fires much quicker. I think he kind of needs a buff, to be honest. His abilities are great, but for his cost, he should actually be able to get kills, and he just kind of can't. Our Runesmith in here fighting with Throgrim. All of my buffs are popped. We're trying to keep our low-tier infantry in this battle. Unfortunately, our Bugsman Rangers have been forced to kind of go into melee, and that's because the constant Pharaoh Manticore summons. We finally managed to take that one down, and just when we think we can free our Bugsman Rangers from melee, they get parked behind by these Black Art Corsairs, and they'll be able just to shoot straight into the battle and focus our Bugsman Rangers in the back. Very good micro from our opponent. Our Ulthar's Raiders here, we're going to mark them with Ulthar and then just shoot at them. The Master Engineer can hold his own against what's left over here. Another Pharaoh Manticore and Doomfire Warlocks. He's decent in melee. I'm not worried about him at all. I actually was glad when they engaged on me. The Skulder Guard were never able to really come online. They get a few kills here, and it's fun to watch them shoot, but I just didn't have enough things to protect them. If I would actually be trying to win with this build, I think I would have cut them and perhaps gotten maybe, I think you can get almost 2 units of Longbeards for the same price as the Skulder Guard. And with 2 extra Longbeards, I mean, we would have had much more of a frontline presence. Our artillery would have been able to stay safer longer, get more value from that. Our opponent made very good use of the Sorceress with the Lore of Beast, using her quite correctly on that, on her mount. She's very mobile, and she's actually a pretty dangerous melee combatant, especially against already damaged units, such as these Ulthar Raiders. So using her to summon when appropriate, and also to engage and to rout off units when appropriate as well. Earlier, she kind of escorted our Runesmith off the battlefield when he was still at, nearly 33% of his health, I would say. And he just routed her right off and then sent her into combat against the Ulthar's Raiders. So very good micro. And unfortunately, Throgrim, with Entrenchment, which is a great use from the Master Engineer. Entrenchment giving him that physical resistance and armor-piercing missile damage doesn't count for Throgrim. But with his own buffs and his own debuffs that he's able to apply, Oath of Vengeance on the Sisters of Slaughter, he's able to stand and fight for much longer than almost any other Lord in the game would be able to against an opponent like Lokir Felhart with all of those buffs popped. And that was a pretty brutal battle for the Dawi. But I had fun using those units that I almost never get to use. We managed to get respectable kills on them. Yeah, just to critique my own build. It was to have fun with the Master Engineer, to try and make maximum havoc with the artillery pieces that we brought. And I'd really hoped to make the Skulder Guard work, but Miners and Dwarf Warriors do not a solid front line make. So yeah, we weren't able to get maximum kills from them, and that made me sad. But I thought the build was fun. Our opponent was very good, a very good player. I would love to face him again with a competitive dwarf build, because I think that would provide me a decent challenge. I think honestly, the build that I would have taken against the Dark Elves would have just absolutely demolished this build. Not not really a critique against the build, because I think it's solid. Sisters of Slaughter plus Hargoneth Executioners do everything you want. But I'm pretty high on Rangers right now. I think Rangers plus Longbeards mixed in with Dwarf Warriors give you a really solid front line, and then Rangers give you tons of DPS. And I think I could have focused down most of this cavalry, counter skirmish the hand bows, and really punish the Slaughter, Sisters of Slaughter play. And while the organ gun and even the flame cannon are not very competitive picks, the Goblobber is almost always a unit that pays for itself. I think in a single volley it took out almost like 15 Hargoneth Executioners, and you gotta love that. But anyway, guys, once again, my name is Brett. My channel is Good Talk Gaming. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you consider subscribing if you haven't already. I've got plenty more Total War Warhammer 2 content to come, and just like the rest of you guys, I'm waiting for the next installment, the next Lord pack, the next campaign pack, whatever they want to drop. I am super ready. I haven't really been grinding Total War Warhammer 2 like I used to, and it's been a while. I'm starting to forget names. I'm starting to forget number values, and I want to get back into it hard. I just need CA to pull me back in. So anyway, guys, I will see you in the next one. Take care.